My name is Nancy Toombs, and welcome to the Data Makes a Difference webinar, a part of our Webinar Wednesday series. And I'm really pleased today to introduce a longtime EDA collaborator, Laith Wardi. And Laith is the owner and the president of Executive Pulse. So we'll have a conversation with Laith, and after Laith's presentation, we'll take some questions. So as we're going through the webinar, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat box, and we'll get to those afterwards. So in terms of context, I really think that it's important to talk a little bit about Executive Pulse. So Executive Pulse is a customer relationship management solution that's built specifically for economic developers. And Laith, your platform is the most widely used business retention and expansion database platform in North America. So that makes you an expert in something very specific, which is data in the economic development space. But before we jump into your presentation, I'd like to ask you just a little bit about Executive Pulse. So it's been around for 21 years. That's a long time. Almost
22, but who's counting?
So tell me a little bit about Executive Pulse. Like, what did you see 22 years ago in the economic development space that was a gap that you felt that you could fill?
Well, Nancy, I hate to kind of disappoint you, but I was not a visionary and I didn't see much. I was doing economic development at the local level. I was doing business retention expansion. The organization that I was working for at the time, this was many years ago, this was, I think, 96, 97. The organization that I was working for did not have a database. I knew enough about how to work in Excel and Access to be dangerous, and I built the first precursor system to what clients are using now across North America. So we started within our organization using a system that I built. I then went to, we started working more regionally in a broader context, again, with business retention expansion. I really didn't understand, at that time, there was no such thing as a web-based or a cloud-based platform. Everything was they called it extranets, meaning it's a system that multiple organizations could tap through the internet. The internet was a relatively new thing. I went to a local IT company and told them, hey, we want to port this database that we built for business retention expansion. We want to port this to an extranet system because we're starting to work regionally. So they helped us build that out. We were still dialing. I can remember we were dialing into the internet at that time. So we kind of built our own regional cloud-based solution for business retention expansion. And the way we really got into this is in my home state of Pennsylvania, and I'm going to talk about, they'll be one of our case studies today, but in my home state of Pennsylvania, I think that at the time they spent upwards of $1 million on a statewide CRM solution that was never deployed. So I was in our state capital, ostensibly there to be trained on this new CRM that never was deployed. And I started showing people what we were using in our region, and we kind of slid into that role. By the way, we were not getting paid that kind of money. We were the cleanup act, but we did not make that kind of money on that technology. But we started working statewide, and then the ball just kept rolling. So I kind of morphed from an economic developer to a technology vendor and a trainer, over the course of a couple of years after that.
Well, you can't underestimate the importance of data when it comes to economic development. And so based on your experience and your expertise, Laith, why is it so important? Like, why is it so critical to have good data management?
Well, I think it's impossible for us today in the world we're living in. We're living in a very fast-paced world. Nancy, there's a lot of moving components to commerce in every community. I don't care, rural, urban, Canada, the US, the UK, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of complexities in our global world. And you can see right now with supply chain and what we are seeing post-pandemic, we are all tied together and things are very complicated. It's impossible to make decisions without data. I don't care if you're talking about, hey, we have a workforce, we think we have a workforce issue, or businesses coming out of the pandemic hopefully need X, Y, and Z. All of those type of bellwethers are ultimately driven by data. Data, companies like Apple and Google or Alphabet or Facebook, those companies are surviving on big data. They have a leg up on every other firm in their industry because they have access and purview to big data. Data drives all of our decisions.
Yeah, and especially, if you're looking for a way to communicate your ROI, especially if you're an elected official, a counselor, a mayor in your community, that's what you're going to turn to. You're going to turn to those concrete numbers because there's no disputing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like, anybody in our industry, and when I say our industry, I don't mean just economic development, economic community, workforce development, any of those, entrepreneurial development, any of those pillars under the umbrella of what we do. Anybody who's looking to put in place sustainable and rational programs, policies, and strategies, they have to be data driven. That's the only way that they're reality based.
So you have a presentation for us that includes some case studies and some case studies right here at home in Alberta. So can we take a look at that now?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to start off just by mentioning that, I don't practice economic development anymore, but the clients that we're working with, and my company does, our company works across Canada, across the US. We've done work in Australia, Mexico, Europe, but our primary fixation is really, Nancy, the US and Canada. That's where our efforts are focused. But we're working with such a diversity of clients these days. When you ask me, hey, can you talk about data and how data is being used? Believe it or not, my biggest job was, how do I hone down the list? Because there's so many great things happening with the way that people are internalizing data, using data for a variety of different purposes. And what we're going to do this afternoon, and this does not have to be arduous by any stretch of the imagination, we're just going to do a quick flyover of some different scenarios, really through the lens of different customers. And I'm going to start today with my home state of Pennsylvania. We are in a commonwealth here. We've got about our state, our province essentially has about 16 million people. We have a couple of major metro areas, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and the rest of our state is largely rural. We are the, if you will, 800-pound gorilla CRM in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are supporting right now, I'll just give you guys a quick flyover, really a number of different initiatives. The PrEP initiative here, Nancy, is really for our local development districts and our small business development centers, and how they're touching a lot of primarily entrepreneurial type of companies. That's what or pre-venture firms, that's what the PrEP brand is all about. The Engage brand is their BR&E program. And believe it or not, in this CRM, the statewide CRM, we also have all the foreign trade reps that are working across the globe on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They're contributing data into the CRM. And I didn't include this, but we also have some large regional workforce investment boards that are also using the platform. So there's a variety of moving parts and a lot of different initiatives and constituents who are using this program. And this just gives you an idea of some of the different logos. We've got literally hundreds of different organizations across the state that are contributing information about what they know, their transactions, their intelligence about the businesses, the work that they're doing about the businesses in our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So this is what I like about this example, and the reason I wanted to kick off with this example is the sheer scale of what's going on here. This program, we are supporting over 1,300 active users across 10 regions of the Commonwealth. So there's a critical mass of intelligence that's flowing into this platform. This is really, in my mind, the quintessential use of a CRM, which is a communication and collaboration tool. The left hand knows what the right hand's doing. It doesn't matter what geographic area you're in. It doesn't matter what organizational vantage point or silo you're in. All these people are contributing to information. And if I need to look up a business, I see a wealth of information here. You can see the number of businesses that these are the focal businesses in the system. There's about 80,000 company profiles and about 100,000 contacts. that we do have the system segmented by geography. There's user role and privacy setting options in this. The other thing I like about this example is that we've got some regional organizations that are using other platforms. They are literally feeding our system dynamically through dynamic data exchange. And we'll talk about that as well, data exchange options actually with one of your provincial communities, Lethbridge. We'll talk about that before we conclude today. The last thing I want to mention about this one that's kind of interesting is we are also at the top level, we are working with the state's labor and industry database. So there is another 800-pound gorilla CRM that's being used by the workforce folks at the state. Our two systems correlate with each other. So Nancy, when I'm in the system, I can literally click a button and say, what does the workforce component look like for this business? And I can see all the digital breadcrumbs that the workforce people have put in there. So we're kind of working on the economic development front. I'm not saying we don't do workforce, because there's some of what we're information that's being housed as workforce related, but there's a whole bureaucracy, if you will, of workforce providers across the state that are putting information into another system. These two systems correlate with each other. So to me, this is, again, just because of scale, the communication and collaboration, the number of users, and the different initiatives that fall under this, I think this is a pretty cool way to kind of look at the lens of how data is being used. This is a dashboard on their business retention expansion program. I don't expect the people on the webinar to be able to see this, but these are analytics literally from a couple of years, and you can see the number of BR&E touches. We've got almost 12,000 touches in a matter of 18 months or 24 months. And you can see some of the trends here that we're looking at, different types of trends. I mean, this is just an easy way to look at trends, KPI information, metric information, and what's the data telling us. And again, the folks here, I think, in our state capital, they're doing a really good job of taking this data and really affecting programs, policies, and strategies with this. And the last thing I'll say about this example is they really did some extensive work with COVID response, and they did that through the lens of the CRM as well, using data in the CRM. So this is, I think this is a good kind of way to kick off. Do you, Nancy, have any questions on this one before we transition?
No, I think that it reinforces what you and I were talking about offline and what we say here at EDA all the time, and that is that economic development is a team sport. And I like how the communication is so clear and easy. Like it's easy, it's simple.
Yeah, this is a good one on a variety of levels. And we've worked with these folks literally since the mid 90s in one way, shape, or form, and they continue to kind of throw us challenges and change things up, et cetera. So I thought this was an interesting one. I'm going to shift, by the way, I'm backfilling. All the last examples are all Canadian examples. So I'm starting off, Nancy, with US examples, and we're going to transition to Canadian example. I'm not forgetting about our friends and customers in Canada, but I've intentionally said I'm going to front load this with the US, and then we're going to finish strong with the Canadian clients. So the second one I want to talk about, and I think this one's really interesting. This is Asheville, North Carolina. And for those of you in Canada that may not understand this market, this is a mid-sized urban center in the United States that has an awful lot of cachet. This is one of those urban magnets where everybody that wants to be cool wants to be in this community. So they not only have a very robust existing industries outlook, but they've got a vibrant entrepreneurial prognosis. There's a lot of people that want to start and grow businesses in Asheville. And most importantly, this part of, and by the way, their state, North Carolina, is a very hospitable state for businesses, generally speaking, as the US goes, and I would say even in a global context. But the last thing I wanted to mention is they are also a magnet for business recruitment and foreign direct investment. This is a market that's got a lot of swagger. So Nancy, the interesting thing about these guys have been with us for a long time, and they've been, in my estimation, they've been kind of blocking and tackling CRM users for a long time. I think we've been working with these folks in this market area. We have a lot of clients in North Carolina, but I think we've been working with this market area probably going on 15 years. And again, they're not standing still. They're always changing things. But what they gave us recently, I thought was interesting for the discussion this afternoon for you guys. So what they've been doing, Nancy, is every year they come up with a business directory. So the folks at the Asheville Regional Chamber, you have 2 or 3 staff people who will spend, and they're not happy about it, by the way, but they will spend months calling businesses and saying, okay, Mrs. Smith, here's what we know about your business. We want to include you in the next year's business directory. Can you substantiate your employment, your sales, where your company's located, who the key contacts are, et cetera? This was a manual process. And then you had 2 or 3 staff people who would compile the information in a database. They had like an Access database. And then they would go to a third-party ad firm and they would take that information and put it into a nice directory view. And the folks at the regional chamber said, this seems like a lot of touches and a lot of unnecessary steps for what we could be doing maybe if we digitize the process. So what we've done for them is we've built them a campaign feature. So no longer did the 3 staff or 4 staff people have to pick up the phone and call businesses. Now what they're doing is basically sending businesses survey campaigns saying, Mrs. Smith, click this link, fill in your information or update your information. When Mrs. Smith gets done with that, that information correlates back to the CRM. And we've also built for them a one-click directory report. So not only are they obtaining that information now automatically or hands-off using automation through the CRM, but we're also generating the reports for them, the directory reports for them automatically. To me, the moral of the story here is you want to make technology work the way you need it to, and you want to eliminate steps. Technology should make your life easier, not more arduous, and that's what they're emblematic of here. So again, the survey campaign, the company responses really create the directory. And I just want to give you guys a quick idea of what this looks like. But before I do, and the data corollary here, Nancy, is that our systems, and a lot of our clients don't know this, but we're going behind the scenes every month and we're validating email addresses. And one of the reasons that that's important is when they're sending these campaigns out, they know which email addresses are good. They have the ability to do data hygiene in the system. They have the ability to update email addresses or see those email addresses that are going to bounce back. So really the prerequisite of all this working the way that it's supposed to, the automation from front end to back end, is the fact, do we have good data hygiene on the emails? And our system provides that functionality. Every client in Alberta and beyond, in Canada and the United States, that's what we offer. And I just wanted you to see, this is the end result. This is Nancy, a one-click report. I'm just taking screenshots here. This is not the way it really looks as a PDF or whatever. They could export this, by the way, as PDF, Word, PowerPoint, but you can see nicely formatted report, table of contents, and I think I grabbed a couple of the more granular pages. We knew, Nancy, that we did a good job with this one, because the people that wanted us to build this for them, when we first showed them the system generated PDF, they didn't believe that we weren't just showing them the ones they used to manually build. We built the automated one so closely that it looks and works and feels exactly like the ones that they used to spend a lot of time on and their ad firm used to spend a lot of time on. So for me, this is a good one because it's, again, kind of the moral of the story is data making your life easier? I feel in this case, it certainly is. And the process itself, because of automation, front end and back end, is making things a lot easier for these folks. Did you have anything on this one?
No, I mean, I think that what's impressive is that it, is this customizable, right? Like it's not a one shoe fits all kind of, because data in every community is different. So, you want to make sure that how you collect it will meet your needs.
They also have, before we leave Asheville, we've already kind of left them, but before we really leave them, they also have some very specific one-click reports they want to do on business recruitment and foreign direct investment. They have some very specific type of, they're measuring jobs, high, low, and basically what do you think the reality is going to be? And they're doing the same with investment. And every month they're going to their boards and saying, this is what's in the queue and this is where we think we're going to fall in terms of jobs and capital investment. So that's, to me, that's another kind of cool way to do this. The next one we're going to focus on is, I mentioned we've been in business as Executive Pulse about 22 years now as of January. This next one is a regional client in Ohio that has been with us for 21 years. So almost since the beginning of our existence as a corporation, this client has been with us, and they are really doing kind of a Swiss Army knife approach to their CRM. Their CRM is literally doing everything for them. It's doing workforce development, it's doing entrepreneurial development, it's doing disaster mitigation, disaster recovery, you name it, BR&E, their foreign direct investment, they're using it for everything. This is I believe it's a 6-county region in Ohio, 5 or 6 counties, and about 30 plus jurisdictions that are using this platform. And this is kind of like, in some respects, Nancy, this is kind of like a mini Pennsylvania example that I gave you, because they've got some scale here. They've got a lot for the size of their market area. They've got a lot of organizations who are contributing to this data. And they've got a lot of users per size of the market area. So, and you can see they've got local, regional, state, and federal users that are all contributing. But that's not really why I focused on this one. I think you could spend time talking about those things. But again, what I like about what they're doing is really the fact that they are using the CRM for virtually everything. This is their repository. You can see this faster than I can say it. Everything from disaster recovery to site selection, matchmaker functionality. They have some very specific FDI programs in places like Israel and Japan. They're using it for that. Downtown revitalization. And you guys in Canada, I don't need to lecture you on buy local. You guys are doing it as an art form across Canada, but they are also using their CRM for buy local. So they are, what I like about their approach is they're taking a very holistic approach, saying, look, everything that we're doing needs to flow into the CRM. It's a little different than the other 2 clients that I've already highlighted for you, that I think they're doing a lot of things in the CRM, but it's not this holistic. What I like about what these guys are doing is it's very holistic. Now, I just showed you the directory view in Asheville. These guys are doing a different type of directory. They're doing resource or asset mapping and resource guide directories in their system. In other words, Nancy, what they're saying is, who does workforce? Who does entrepreneurial development? Who's local government? They are mapping those resources into the CRM, and it's not uncommon for them when they are working with business recruitment for somebody who's looking at investment in their community to say, hey, what kind of workforce resources can we count on? They can tailor these resource guides on the spot to say, these are the people that do incumbent workforce training or new workforce hires. So they're mapping all those resources. Those resources are going into the system, and they're creating these type of resource guides on the fly. And you'll notice, Nancy, the graphical image here. These are some of the counties that are participating and some of the companies that are in those respective regions. So again, this isn't as tricked out as the Asheville version. It doesn't have to be, because this is really not for public consumption as much. But you get the idea that this provides a pretty cool thing. Here's the other thing they're doing, and I didn't mention this. They have a business solutions center. They have a shared space that has a number of different, within the facility, it's a huge facility, has a number of different rooms. And we have built out for them some very specific calendar functionality and analytics that tell them who over the course of the year, or the day, week, month view, who's using rooms, what are the purpose of using rooms, what's the utilization. This is a calendar view, and you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different rooms. And I just took a snapshot of like one day, and you can see who's using the rooms. This is another one of those things that keeps everybody on the same page. This is a one-off for us, Nancy. We're not doing this anywhere else for any other clients. This is something they wanted for this shared space. And again, there's a whole litany of analytics that tell them the utilization of different rooms, who's utilizing it most. They're even asking, like, how many times do we provide beverages or food service, or broadband or whatever. All those are things they want to measure. And again, I think that's an interesting kind of take on what data can tell you. Did you want to ask anything about this or contribute anything here?
No, keep going. I have some questions in the back of my mind, but we'll give other people an opportunity to ask questions as well.
This is another thing you guys are doing. I don't need to tell you anything in Alberta or British Columbia about natural disasters, but you'll notice this is another one of their analytics they did business walks post tornadoes. They had a string of tornadoes a few years ago, and this is the analytics that I just generated them, but they were fresh 3 years ago. But these are analytics, and again, think about it. They were sharing this information with the Red Cross and their disaster folks locally. And you can see the different FEMA categories, which in the States, this is how we're going to be classifying disasters. This is all data driven for them. So again, I think that's a pretty cool example. We are now going to transition to Canada. I'm going to start with our friends in North Bay in Ontario. Now, I do want to mention something. I asked all these folks before we did the session here if it was okay if I used them for an example. And I was thrilled that North Bay said yes, because they're doing Outlook integration. I thought that was pretty cool. And I wanted to talk about Outlook integration. They said, yes, you can use this as an example, but we don't want you showing our system. So I am skirting around this, guys. I'm sorry. I wanted to use them as an example because I like what they're doing. They have like 12 staff people who are using Outlook integration. I think that's, again, a cool way of using data and the integration between the CRM and Outlook, but they didn't want me to show actual data. So we're going to talk about them. We're going to say good things about them, but we're not really going to get into the weeds on what they're doing specifically. This is a client that has had a lot of staff transitions. And, there's been a lot of training needs with these guys. They are doing this nuts and bolts. They're doing a lot of basic stuff with this. But they're doing BRE and investment attraction primarily. But again, the reason I wanted to focus on them, I guess they have about 12, I think now it's 12. They have 12 staff people who are using Outlook integration. And that's really what I wanted to focus on here. Before I do that, I do want to mention with BRE, what they actually did is they took a snapshot of what the province of Ontario was doing with their long form BRE, and we baked that into their process. So they took and adapted what the provincial government was doing with their BRE outreach, and we built that in. But what I do want to show you is this whole idea of Outlook, and the idea with Outlook integration, and what they like about Outlook integration is they are using more specifically Exchange Server for Outlook. So they are using the network version of Outlook. That information is going back and forth between Executive Pulse and Outlook. And more specifically, it's about email messages that are ending up in both places. There's contact management functionality and calendar syncing in both places. So think about this. I'm sending Mrs. Smith in the prior example that I gave you, I'm sending her an email. If they sync that in the CRM, we understand that email gets linked to Mrs. Smith's profile in the CRM. It gets linked to Mrs. Smith's business profile in the CRM. And as the sender, it gets linked to my profile in the CRM. That all happens automatically. And there's a lot of cool data migration functionality with this. So I could literally take all my contacts in Outlook and literally drag and drop them into the CRM or vice versa. I can manage contacts. So I can say, hey, I've got a great part of Mrs. Smith's profile in Outlook is great, and part of it in Executive Pulse is great. I want to merge those two or mash them up. I can do that. There's a lot of cool functionality. This is where, guys, I'm showing you a test Outlook view because they wouldn't let me show their actual. But I just want to mention to you, there's a whole Outlook Executive Pulse panel here. More specifically, on the right-hand side, you can be in Outlook and work in Executive Pulse. So this is a cool feature because when I have Outlook open, I can still index information I have on contacts or companies directly from Outlook, referencing the CRM. I think this is kind of a cool feature. And again, I wish they would have allowed me to show you their real system, but I think you get the idea. The next one we're going to go to, Nancy, is British Columbia, your neighbors. To the west. We're going to focus on BCEDA. There's a critical mass of users here. There's about 70 communities, and some of them are regional clients. initially we got involved with them based on BR&E, but they're doing investment attraction as well. That's typically the themes with most of our clients these days are doing retention and recruitment. A lot of them are doing entrepreneurial development and workforce as well. They have been really heavy into the COVID-19 assessment and response. There are communities in British Columbia that have literally done 4 different forays or campaigns during the course of the pandemic to really understand the trials and tribulations of the business community. The other thing that they've been really good at is doing things like business walks and focus groups within the system. So it's not just one-to-one interactions. British Columbia has been great about one-to-many or many-to-many interactions. And they've actually taken the business walk concept during the pandemic and are now using our campaign functionality, what they call virtual business walks. So a place like Vernon, British Columbia will say, hey, we don't have the time or the inclination to go face-to-face with businesses anymore. We're going to use campaign functionality. We're going to ask businesses 4 or 5 quick questions in our downtown corridor, and we're going to get responses that correlate back to the CRM. They're really the most aggressive use, I would say, of any clients that we have on the survey and mail campaign functionality. Part of that is the ability for them to develop their own surveys. So think about this. Baked into the CRM, and look, there's nothing wrong with SurveyMonkey. I love SurveyMonkey. It's a great platform, but your data is in SurveyMonkey. There's no CRM component to SurveyMonkey. What these folks in British Columbia are doing are they're building their own surveys like they would in SurveyMonkey. They're sending them through our platform like they would a Constant Contact or a MailChimp, and they're getting those results to funnel back into the CRM. So again, there's kind of a correlation of what we talked about with Asheville, that it's really low touch. There's a lot of automation here. They don't need to do a lot here. Not only did they get responses on what businesses are telling them, but they also get responses on how well the campaigns are working. So think about it. It's not just the analytical trail that says 15% of businesses said this, 20% said that, but it's how many people actually got the campaign, how many opened the campaign, how many responded to the campaign. They're able to look at both of those type of analytics in British Columbia. And again, I think that they've done a really good job. Our partnership with BCEDA, they are doing a lot. The folks at BCEDA are doing a lot in terms of masthead development. So they have a staff person who's doing customized mastheads for every community in the province that comes on board. They're doing some cool stuff in British Columbia. I like that one. The last one, last but certainly not least, is Lethbridge in your province. And I'm going to tell you, in my mind, these folks are really emblematic of discipline. When I think about, one of the things that I think is really the demarcation between people that are doing this well and people that aren't is there's a discipline to memorialize what you're doing someplace. It doesn't have to be Executive Pulse. It could be Excel, it could be Access, it could be another CRM, but it's a discipline to say, hey, we're going to document what we're doing. And I think the folks in Lethbridge are really excellent at that. I also feel like they have a good concept of how they're going to use data as an empowerment tool for their organization, but more specifically for their community. How are we going to drive decisions using data? So Lethbridge is a cool example to me, not only because of again, the consistent, active, and disciplined use of the CRM. I feel like they're not people that we feel like we have to tell them, hey, you need to use it for this reason. They just use it for this reason. They are doing a lot of touches with local businesses. They're doing a lot with comments and file attachments and kind of journaling. So you really understand looking at the digital breadcrumbs that are affixed or attached to a business, who's done what over the course of time. I think that's important. Those chronologies are really important. But the reason that I want to focus on them above and beyond everything else is they are using a third-party application for entrepreneurial development. They use an Airtable system where some of their staff people have built out a very robust and a very nice entrepreneurial development system. And the folks in economic development, pure economic development, are saying, hey, these two systems should talk to each other. And what we've been working with them on is this integration between these two platforms, kind of reminiscent of Pennsylvania, but in a much more specific way between these two applications. And really the one thing that I want to mention here is what we are interested in doing on our end of the equation. We're not trying to write to their Airtable data. That's not the intent of what's going on here. We want to, however, make sure that we understand what's happening with entrepreneurial development within our CRM system. So when the folks in Lethbridge are looking at Executive Pulse, they don't have to say what are our entrepreneurial friends doing in some of the same space, some of the same digital space. Here is a quick screenshot of Airtable information. And again, the folks on staff have done a really nice job of building out this application to meet their needs. This information we are mimicking in our system using data exchange. This is our grid of the same information. So it doesn't matter which view you're looking at, Airtable or Executive Pulse, you're apprised and seeing the same information. And again, to me, the way I look at this is the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And again, there is a semblance here of I don't have to do a heavy lift or double data entry. Data in this case is being entered. They're doing a lot of data entry directly into our platform, but the entrepreneurial folks are not entering data in our platform. They're not putting events in our platform or anything. They're doing everything in Airtable. They're entering it once, but it's showing up in both places and it's showing up consistently in both places. And I think that's kind of for me, that's really an important aspect of what the folks in Lethbridge are doing. So that's really kind of, Nancy, that's kind of the 30,000 foot overview. I just had a couple like last minute slides I just wanted to show you, and we can talk about whatever you want. But you know, I feel like if it's not, and I'm not just talking about what we offer, obviously this is the system I know. I'm giving you examples based on our clients, but everybody out there is using data in one way, shape, or form, or should be. I'm going to say this, in economic development, if you're not putting information somewhere, it's irrelevant. It doesn't exist to me. It's got to go somewhere. Your digital footprints, your electronic breadcrumbs have to go somewhere. I would say to you that those people that push back on using some data repository, it tells me they don't have consistent work habits. They're not transparent in their work habits. And ultimately, especially if you're working within an office with 4 or 5 staff people, or you're working in many of the examples I gave you across a region, you're not ultimately accountable. So when you're engaged in the practice of putting data somewhere, you're consistent in your work habits, you're transparent, and ultimately you are accountable to yourself and others. I think those are important things. Here's what the CRM gives you. It gives you institutional knowledge. It's a communication and collaboration tool, and it should give you analytics. It should give you easy to use analytics. I just want to mention, I'll go back to Pennsylvania real quick. All of our clients can do this, but in Pennsylvania, we have regional industrial resource partners. These are people that work just with manufacturers. They are following by NAICS codes 31, 32, 33 across the Commonwealth and saying to the system, I'm following every manufacturer. Every Friday, I want a report sent to me telling me what people in my geographic area are doing with anybody in these 3 NAICS, general NAICS designations. That's another creative way to use technology. I don't have to log in physically. The system is going to send me through an automated process, basically a touch report on what all my colleagues are doing with manufacturers under my geographic umbrella. I think that's a nice way to use systems. So this is all about those things. So Nancy, that's about where I was going to end up today.
You know, we'll certainly open it up to questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. I see a lot of familiar faces, including our president, Trevor Lewington from Lethbridge. So feel free to enter any questions that you have into the chat box. Laith, one question that I did have though is, based on your experience in this, 22 years with Executive Pulse, what have communities been talking to you about overall, and what have you observed? Communities who are using a repository for data versus communities who are not. Like what have you observed as the bottom line success of those 2 types of communities?
I would say communities that aren't using it, believe it or not, most of the people that are coming to us and kicking the tires, so to speak, or looking at this, trying to vet it out. Some of them are coming from other CRMs. And I want to talk about that in just a second, because I think this is about making love connections between the CRM and the user group. And it doesn't mean executive pulse. It means you need to find the technology vehicle that's going to work well for you. You don't want to switch technology vehicles every year. So that to me is symptomatic of not doing the vetting correctly. But believe it or not, Nancy, most of who we're competing against these days are Excel files. And it's not just rural people or rural communities. It's urban communities that say there are 5 of us in the office. One person is doing foreign direct investment. Somebody else is doing membership management, et cetera. We all have our own spreadsheets. That is not a way to communicate and collaborate, because we all know that Excel begins and ends on your device typically. Even with Office 365, there's really a limited type of collaboration and communication using something like Excel. So I feel like the trends today are we don't have to convince people so much about the value of data. I think today for most people, they understand the value of data and what they should be doing with data, generally speaking. I think with a lot of folks, though, they don't understand that data inputs will govern the outcomes. We have a lot of clients that will say to us, existing clients that say, well, I want to generate this report. And I say to them, we didn't build the system to allow you to generate this report. The data inputs and how you're storing information or classifying information will ultimately tell us what we can do on the analytical side. So a lot of times what we say to people is, look down the road 3 years. What do you want to measure? What do you want to be able to look at in terms of trends or opportunities? Let's reverse engineer the system so it can do that for you.
You know, I think that most of you know that we do have a licensing agreement with you. Our Alberta Business Counts program does offer this platform. Head over to our website, take a look. It's certainly, we have 14 Alberta communities who have signed up. Many of them are on the webinar today. You heard about one specifically. So go ahead and check it out. Our Alberta Business Counts program is certainly worthwhile, and it's worth the money. You know, I think that it's an important investment if you want to have this data to really measure your bottom line and report back to your community and showcase the advancements that you've made in these certain areas. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat box. I know Erin Crane from Lethbridge is on as well. And she has some very nice words. And Erin, would you like to join us? And you said something nice in the chat box. Would you like to share it with us, or would you like me to read what you have written?
Sure. Well, there is a question in there now.
Oh, is there? Okay.
But,
yes.
Yeah, thank you, Laith, for that. I wrote in there that you made us sound way cooler than I think that we actually are, but appreciate it.
You guys are cool. You're very cool.
But I wanted to ask you about breaking down, some of those barriers. And I love the idea of sharing this, with maybe our provincial partners or everything else. But what are some of the strategies or tools that you guys offer that ensure some of that confidentiality as
Yeah,
well?
that's a good question. We have 3 different ways to govern user access. We have user role options. So, you guys could be administrative level users. You can see and do everything in the system. I'm a local banker and you want to be able to send me work tickets, but the only thing you want me to be able to see is the business you're referring to me and the work ticket that you're sending me. That level of access as a user role is available. We even have volunteer outreach user roles for those people that are doing BR&E and saying, hey, I've got an eye doctor or a dentist that I want to go out and do BR&E. We have a volunteer role that limits significantly what they can do in the system. So user roles are one way to keep data intact. We also have geographic access. I mentioned Pennsylvania as an example, or Ohio. We have a lot of users who can only see the world begins and ends within the confines of their city or county. They may be top level users, but the only thing they can see is the data within their geographic bucket. So that's another way to segment data, and we can mix and match those 2 things. The wild card for us the past few years has been grouping and privacy settings. So Erin, you and I could be a work group. And I say, I don't care if she sees my emails, my file attachments, she can see my comments, but I don't want anybody else to see those things when I add them in the system. I can create a work group. I can create a privacy setting. The system knows the only time it deviates from that setting is when I say, I'm adding a file, but anybody can see this one. Normally, it's going to say only Aaron can see his files. So there's so many ways we can stratify information now. I would love to take credit for any of these ways. They really happened over time based on people saying the privacy settings. The genesis of that, I think, was Asheville probably 10, 15 years ago, 12 years ago. They said, hey, they're members of our team who are working on foreign direct investment. Nobody else should see their deal flow except those two people. That's when we started doing the privacy settings. So there's a variety of switches you can pull to govern access.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. We've got a few minutes left. Can you draw a direct line for me, Laith, between, and I guess maybe the answer is intuitive, but draw the direct line between recovering our economies after this pandemic and a data repository?
Yeah, I don't know how you make decisions on who's feeling the most pain. There are businesses, I don't need to tell anybody on the webinar today, there are businesses that have profited and boomed during the pandemic versus those who have struggled to keep their doors open, or worse yet, have not kept their. How do you know who they are if you don't have data? I mean, it's easy to say, oh, I heard John down the street had to close the local bar because of COVID. But beyond that, all these decisions need to be derived by data. I feel like if you're doing BR&E systematically and sustainably, you need to be putting the information somewhere. It's inconceivable to me that you're doing business recruitment or foreign direct investment, if you're lucky enough to work with foreign firms, without some sort of analytical component. It's impossible to do meaningful workforce development if you don't know what type of jobs are out there and who needs what. And so I feel all this ultimately goes back to what kind of data do you have?
Well, and I'll reiterate again that head over to our website, read more about this and the concept of this data collection with our Alberta Business Counts program. I don't know, are there any more questions? I can't, I don't know, Laith, anything else you would like to add?
I just say, again, find the solution that works for you. Find something that works for you. Make sure you're working with a vendor that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be us. Just make sure. What I don't like to see happen, years ago, I felt my job was, let's convert everybody to what we're doing. No, my job now is to make sure that people feel comfortable with this. And what really kind of frustrates me is when people spend 5 minutes trying to acclimate themselves to this and then say, well, this is too difficult or whatever. This is like anything else. Anybody who picks up a car at the airport that they're unfamiliar with has to figure out, how do I open the trunk? Geez, if I have to get gas, is it on the left or right-hand side? We have to acclimate ourselves to doing things a different way. Spend some time on the technology. The time you put in is going to produce huge dividends on the back end. And it doesn't have to be arduous. It doesn't have to be difficult, but spend some time. And the last thing I would just say to you is, part of the adoption of a CRM is really evaluation of the methodologies and processes that you're using. Hey, are we doing BR&E the right way? Is there a better way to do this? Is the data telling us everything we need to know? Is what we want to do in workforce development? Are we getting the right analytics to give our workforce partners so they can affect change? All this stuff is really kind of a 360 view of what's going on and how we can do it better.
All right. Well, any other questions? Anything else before we decide to wrap up? Well, I'm not seeing anything. So thank you very much, Laith. Excellent.
Thank you.
About the platform, about the importance of data in general as it relates to economic development. So thanks very much for that. All of the information today will be emailed to you, to all of you, including a link to a recording of the webinar and links on our website about the Alberta Business Counts program. Our next webinar in our Webinar Wednesday series is December 1st. That's next week. It's already December next week, and the topic is the importance of shopping local. And it is very timely because Christmas is going to be here before we know it. In fact, it's 1 month today is Christmas Eve. Can you get your head around that? That's amazing. So we're all going to be doing our Christmas shopping, and what a great opportunity to support local businesses. We're going to be talking to Pincher Creek next week. They have a really interesting campaign that is supporting their local businesses that has really yielded excellent results. So you might even get some ideas for your own communities. So be sure to join us. Laith, thank you once again. Aaron, thanks for chiming in at the last minute. And have a good week, everyone. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.